Sightings. How you doing today? Welcome to the show, First Contact Radio. All right, let's jump into our cosmic weather for today. Starting off at spaceweather.com. Our current conditions show us that the solar wind is blowing at 414.1 kilometers per second. Our planetary K index is quiet. It's at a 1. And our chance for flares are very, very low. 1% for an M class, 1% for X class. But there is still a small 20% chance that there might be some geomagnetic storm activity that will take place just due to the increases that are going on in the atmosphere of the wind and so on and so forth. Alright, and if you see any auroras, it's because of the wind and the events that are taking place. Alright, our sun sign is the same. It's going to be for the rest of the month, which is in Pisces, our next couple weeks. And we've moved into that in-between phase. We're in between now Pisces and Aries for our moon sign. Pisces, remember the fish, same as the sun sign that we're in. And Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, so we're going back to that starting position coming up, and that will be fully engaged tomorrow when we get into the sign of Aries. But today we're in that in-between phase, going from the water of Aries, or water of Pisces, to the fire of Aries. So the element is what we're looking for to see how we're going to apply those things in our life. The current moon phase is waxing. We're on our way up. We're already at 3% full, moving up towards the full moon in a couple of weeks. On the dream spell calendar, we've progressed ahead one day. We're now at the 10th position. You can see right here on our wave spell of 13 days. The kin for today, which is right in the middle, is the World Bridger. The guide for today is the Wizard. And then the supporting kin all around it is the Warrior, the Eagle, and the Skywalker. The phrase for today: I perfect in order to equalize, producing opportunity. I seal the store of death with the planetary tone of manifestation. I am guided by the power of timelessness. And on the Gregorian calendar, it is Thursday, February 23rd, 2012. Alright, so moving right along. That gets us started for today. What I'm going to do to get things started for our first is going to be highlights from the debate last night with Ron Paul and the other three candidates. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. This is a 24-minute clip. I'm not going to play all 24 minutes. I'll play about, roughly about 10 minutes of it or so. Give you a chance to hear what went on there. It was a good debate, and Ron Paul, as always, stood his ground, and made a good impact. So let's listen to what Dr. Paul had to say.
Ron Paul, the delegate hunter, keeping his campaign going by picking and choosing his battles.
We have the message that America needs at this particular time.
And the Texas Congressman, Ron Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican candidates for President of the United States. Congressman Paul, we begin with you, sir.
I'm Congressman Ron Paul, Congressman from Texas. I am the defender of the Constitution. I'm the champion of liberty. This shows the roadmap to peace and prosperity.
I'm Rick Sant. Congressman Paul, you've questioned the fiscal conservative credentials of all these gentlemen, but particularly this week, Senator Santorum. You have a new television ad that labels him a fake. Why?
Because he's a fake.
I'm real, Ron. I'm real.
Congratulations.
I'm real. Thank you.
No, I find it really fascinating that when people are running for office, they're really fiscally conservative. When they're in office, they do something different, and then when they explain themselves, they say, oh, I want to repeal that. So the senator voted for No Child Left Behind, but now he voted for it, but now he's running on the effort to get rid of it. So I think the record is so bad, you know, with the politicians. And, you know, nobody accuses me of not having voted for too much. They're always accusing me for not voting for enough. And I've been running in office off and on for a good many years. And over all those years, I've never voted for a budget deficit. I never voted to increase the national debt. Matter of fact, there's only one appropriation bill that I voted for, and that was for veterans. I assumed from the 1970s on that we were embarking on a very dangerous path, and we're involved in that danger right now. So this idea of being fiscally conservative now that we're running for office and we're going to repeal something that we did before, I mean, it loses credibility is what our problem is. So, and the one thing that I think should annoy all Americans is the voting for foreign aid. I mean, just think, their foreign aid packages, they're huge, and when the member votes for it, they don't say, well, this money's going to ABC because I love that country, but it's the principle of the way the government works. You vote for foreign aid because for some weird reason it's supposed to be good for America, but then it goes and helps all our enemies. That's what I disapprove of.
Senator Santorum, respond quickly.
Ron, the Weekly Standard just did a review looking at the national taxpayer unions, I think Citizens Against Government Waste, and they measured me up against the other 50 senators who were serving when I did, and they said that I was the most fiscally conservative senator in the Congress in the 12 years that I was there. My ratings with the national taxpayer unions were A's or B's. Government waste, I got a Hero Award. I was a leader, as you know, on taking on tough issues, which is the entitlement programs, not just welfare reform, but I also worked on Medicare reform and Medicaid reform, and also was a leader on trying to deal with Social Security. And I did that not representing one of the most conservative districts in the state of Texas, but in the state of Pennsylvania, with the second largest per capita population of seniors in the country. And I can tell you, those seniors really cared about Social Security. Why? Because all my rich seniors moved to Florida and Arizona. And what's left in Pennsylvania is folks who relied on Social Security. And I was out there as a Republican senator, a conservative voting record, over a 90% conservative voting record from the American Conservative Union. By the way, Ron, you ranked 145th in the bottom half of Republicans this year in a conservative voting record from that same organization. We had a strong record in a tough state to be a conservative. If I can stand up in the state of Pennsylvania, which hasn't elected a Republican president since 1988, and have a strong principled voting record on issues that were tough in my state, senior issues. Imagine now, as the President of the United States, with a Tea Party movement and a riled-up conservative base, what we can accomplish in Washington, D.C.
Congressman quickly.
You know, that's always a cop-out when you compare yourself to the other members of Congress. The American people are sick and tired of the members of Congress. They get about 9% rating. But this whole thing about comparison of conservative votes, I think you make a very important point. I don't rate one at the top. If it's spending or on taxes, I'm at the very top because I vote for the least amount of spending and the least amount of taxes, which means that some of the conservative ratings, you have to realize, sometimes conservatives want to spend money too. When it comes to overseas spending, you vote for the foreign aid. Conservatives are quite pleased with spending money overseas, but if you're a strict fiscal conservative and a constitutionalist, you don't vote for that kind of stuff, and so you can't just go by the ratings.
As you can see, it's an important issue to the people in the audience. I think it's
the United States Senate. There was transparency, and Congressman Paul, who is one of the most prolific earmarksers in the Congress today, would tell you, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that that's a fact.
Right.
That he.
I think you got a little bit of a chance to say a word.
Mr. Speaker, you were referenced by the governor. You first, then Congressman Paul. Don't worry, we'll get to you, Congressman, I promise. Good. Congressman Paul, Answer Senator Santorum, please, sir.
I followed that, and you know, there's reason for the confusion because because it's all Congress's fault. They're all messed up. They don't know what they're doing in Congress is the real reason. But this whole idea of earmarking is designating how the money is spent. What a lot of people don't understand is if the Congress doesn't say the way the money should be spent, it goes to the executive branch. And that's the bad part. If you were actually cutting, it would make a difference. But you don't want to give more power to the executive branch. Even if I'm president, I don't want more power over that funding. That should be with the people and with the Congress. But earmarking, the reason we get into trouble is the responsibility of Congress. Take your highway funds. We're supposed to pay a user fee. We pay our gasoline tax. We should get our fair share back. But what do? They take the highway funds and other these trust funds, and they spend this money overseas in these wars that we shouldn't be fighting. And then when the highways need building, then you have to go and fight the political system and know who to deal with and maneuver and try to get some of your money back. But if you say you're against the earmarking and fuss and fume over, the answer is vote against the bill. That is what I do. I argue for the case of the responsibility being on the Congress, but it's the responsibility of us who believe in fiscal conservatism to vote against the bill. We need to vote against the spending is what we need to do.
All right. Point. He says, quote, the bailout actually was something that really worked. Is that Republican governor wrong?
Well, you know that's interesting that when they argue that case. First, I don't like the idea that you have good bailouts and bad bailouts. If bailouts are bad, they're bad, and we shouldn't be doing it. But this argument about maybe one that works, you know, well, now that the bankruptcy or the bailing out of GM worked, I said that's sort of like if a criminal goes out and robs a bank and he's successful, therefore you endorse what he did because he's successful. But you have to rob people. You have to distort the law. The government is supposed to protect contracts. They're not supposed to regulate contracts, and they're not supposed to undermine contracts. And that's what we've been doing. In the housing bubble, we undermine contracts. And this is what we're doing here. So you want to respect the contracts. A lot of people will accuse me of advocating a free market, that there's no regulations. Actually, the regulations are tougher because you have to go through bankruptcy and you have to face up to this. And it isn't like General Motors would be destroyed. Newt made that point there, that there were good parts of General Motors, but politicians can't figure this out. Then they serve the special interest, and then you have labor fighting big business. I opt for the free market and the defense of liberty. That's what we need in this country.
All right.
As an OB doctor, I've dealt with birth control pills and contraception for a long time. This is a consequence of the fact the government has control of medical care and medical insurance, and then we fight over how we dictate how this should be distributed. It's sort of like in schools. Once the government takes over the schools, especially at the federal level, then there's no right position. Then you have to argue which prayer are you allowed to pray, and you get into all the details. The problem is the government is getting involved in things they shouldn't be involved, especially at the federal level. But sort of along the line of the pills creating the immorality, I don't see it that way. I think the immorality creates the problem of wanting to use the pills, so you don't blame the pills. I think it's sort of like the argument, conservatives use the argument all the time about guns. Guns don't kill, criminals kill. So in a way, it's the morality of society that we have to deal with. The pill is there, and you know, it contributes maybe, but the pills can't be blamed for the immorality of our society.
Yeah. Governor, please.
Yeah. The fact is, for almost all of us who've been at this for any length of time, we are now looking at an abyss that forces you to change what you may once have thought. And I suspect all four of us are much more worried today about the power of the state than we would have been, with the possible exception of Congressman Paul, than we would have been at any point in the last 25 years.
John,
Congressman, please.
Follow-up. You know, we talk about the morning after pill. Actually, the morning after pill is nothing more than a birth control pill. So if birth control pills on the market, the morning after pill. So if you're going to legalize birth control pills, you can't separate the two. They're all basically the same hormonally. But once again, the question is, if you voted for Planned Parenthood, like the senator has, you voted for birth control pills. And you literally, because funds are fungible, you literally they vote for abortion because Planned Parenthood gets the money. Oh, I'll buy birth control pills, but then they have the money left over to do the abortion. So that's why you have to have a pretty strong resistance to voting for these bunches of bills put together. Planned Parenthood should get nothing, let alone designate how they spend.
Senator Santorum.
This is the UFO News with Joshua Poet.
All right, Dirk, thank you very much. This is Josh. This is the UFO News. Let's go ahead and pull up the stories for today. First story takes us out to Boston and Australia. This comes to us from theexaminer.com. Theexaminer.com. Tracy Pierce. A giant cigar-shaped UFO was recorded above the skyline of Boston, Massachusetts on the evening of Sunday, February 19, 2012. It was 7:30 p.m. when the huge, unidentified flying object, studded with multiple lights, was recorded in a series of still photographs over an unidentified body of water in Boston. It seems that these pictures were taken from the feed of a webcam overlooking the city. The video was posted online by one Cordialumir on February 20, 2012. This prolific YouTube user has scores of videos that allegedly show unidentified flying objects in the sky. Many of these videos are composed of images compiled from webcams. With the first minute of 10 seconds of the video is dedicated to the UFOs over Boston, the remainder of the 5-minute video shows UFO activity reportedly captured in the skies over Australia. The images from Australia are definitely from a webcam. They show the same elongated type of unidentified flying objects studded with rows of lights. Although the UFOs from these pictures have not been positively identified, there is plausible theory behind the photos. Since webcams generally refresh only after 30 seconds delay, the images could result from a time-lapse photography type of effect that makes moving object like an airplane appear to be as an elongated version of itself with many of its features multiplied. This may result in unusual pictures that can be mistaken for the UFO image in both Boston and Australia. Well, let's take a look for ourselves here. See what you think. Okay, now we're going to be just going to move through this video here because alright, now just in regards to what they're saying, okay, this does not look to me like a object that was distorted by a webcam. How could I say that? Because I've seen many images through webcams and that does not look like an image that was distorted. That looks like an image that has multiple lights on it. Alright, yes, this is not just something that was elongated. You can tell just by paying attention, looking at the image and looking at other images over time will help you to make that comparison. If this was elongated, these things would all be distorted as well. Alright, now let's move on here. There's another object. Now the ones in the distance there and these kind of things, this is a little bit more challenging to tell because of how the effects are. You can tell that's not natural. And yeah, this here also is something that is more of an effect than the actual real thing. Alright, so look at the video. It's 5 minutes in length. Check it out, see what you think for yourself. Alright, here from ScottWaringBlogspot.com. Russian show talks about Nibiru, or Planet X, as it approaches February 2012. Alright, this is the orbit of Planet X, and this is our solar system here, how it's supposed to be coming into the system. Watch this Nibiru documentary from Russia. They sound very certain about its existence and its approach. A rogue planet with a 3,600-year orbit is about to enter the inner solar system and visit Earth. This threatening planet was discovered by the ancient Mesopotamians, who named it Nibiru. It was also known by the Mayans, who associated with the end, December 21, 2012, of their long count calendar. Although astronomers and space scientists are tracking Nibiru, this information is being kept from the public as part of a worldwide conspiracy. All right, now we got a video under here, and I'm not going to play the video. I'm going to leave this video for you. It's a 7-minute long video, and it's very interesting about what I just read. All right, next story. 10 meters. UFO hovers over Albuquerque, New Mexico in daytime. There's a video. This was on the 22nd. I first spotted the cigar-shaped object in front of my uncle's house. I watched it for about 3 minutes as it moved. I then found it again closer in the backyard. I'm not sure what this thing is, but it seemed to spin black and shiny. It seemed to be very big, about 20 to 30 feet long and about 5 to 6 feet round. It made no sound, but the dogs didn't like it at all. Then I watched it move towards the mountains where it disappeared. All right. This was over Albuquerque. Let me just I'm going to have to zip forward here. This is a 4-minute video. Alright, still looking, not quite seeing it here. Got the object right out there. It's kind of underneath the telephone wires. Yeah, it's still there. Okay. So there we go. We got the small black thing above the wires there. Check out the video. See what you think. The next story comes to us from Buffalo, New York on the 22nd. Daytime of some kind of triangle formation was recorded above the sky of Buffalo on Wednesday the 22nd. All right. There's the object in question. You can see it, 3 lights on one object or 3 particular objects, each with a light. I would venture to say it looks like one object with 3 lights on it as opposed to 3 separate objects. Alright, very good. That was over Buffalo, New York. And our last story here comes from Educating Humanity, and it asks the question, why are people reluctant to report UFO sightings? History reveals the answer. From the beginning, society, in the persons of prominent scientists, government officials, military officers, journalists, and ordinary citizens, would make things disagreeable for those who insisted they had seen strange flying objects and those who believed them. Whenever there were flying saucers, there was also ridicule dished out in generous portions to anyone courageous or foolish enough to defy the reigning orthodoxy. In 1951, Cosmopolitan article, prepared with Air Force cooperation encouragement, lashed out at the screwballs and true believers who thought that they were seeing flying saucers. In the debates to come, others would accuse UFO observers of every conceivable social crime of mental disorder. As a result, only a small minority of witnesses would ever report their sightings, and many who did soon lived to regret it. In 1977, a group of professional debunkers warned the New York Times that belief in UFOs is not only irrational, but also dangerous. Its sufficiently widespread civilization itself could cause collapse. Yet in the face of jeering derision and inflated rhetoric, the UFO sightings continued. The great majority of sightings would be seen by individuals who would have been implicitly believed that they have been testifying to anything less outrageous. Of course, these witnesses were not always right. Even sympathetic investigators found that most reports could be explained conventionally. Few of the reports were outright UFO hoaxes, around 1% according to the Air Force's estimate. But sane and sober eyewitnesses often mistook weather balloons, stars, and planets, advertising planes and other ordinary objects for extraordinary objects. Still, some sightings stubbornly resisted explanation. In the summer of 1947, the Air Materiel Command, AMC, was asked to study the situation and make recommendations about what should be done. On September 23rd, Lieutenant General Nathan F. Twining, the AMC head, wrote his superior with his analysis. The phenomenon reported as something real and not visionary or fictitious. 3 months later, the Air Force established Project Sign under AMC command, which is headquartered at Wright Field, soon to be the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio, to investigate UFO reports. So, You know, you report a UFO, you talk about UFOs, you say things, and people might think you're wacky. But hey, you know what? That's how it is. People say all kind of crazy things. Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter at all. All that matters is that things are reported, and if people don't want to believe, that's okay. Because there are those who will believe and understand and do the research, and that's how it's been throughout history. So, no big deal there. I'm going to jump to a song. I'll be back. Stay tuned.
What if our government was responsible for some of the greatest crimes against this nation? Would you really want to know? These are big questions, but these questions deserve answers. It's time to demand the truth.
People shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid.
9/11 was an inside job. Kennedy was killed by the CIA. Jimmy Carter saw UFO. Answers to secrets you need to know. So wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. The evidence is overwhelming. Step past your fear, take a look. Illuminati lies keep growing, but they're illusion from your eyes. And wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. What would our founding fathers say if they were alive today? Must be turning in their graves. Redcoats are coming, big brother's watching. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. What if I land and two if I see? And I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. When a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Patriots arise. It's time to demand the truth.
Okie doke, let's continue on here. Our next story, we're going to continue on with Ron Paul, and this was a post-debate interview that he had, and I want you to hear this.
With me and Congressman, at the end of the debate tonight, you said the greatest misconception was that people think maybe you can't win. You are the only candidate on the stage tonight who's yet to get a win. Came pretty close in Maine, but when you look at the arena, Arizona and Michigan next, Wyoming and Washington State, then 10 states on Super Tuesday, to prove your point, doesn't Congressman Paul need to get a win?
It would be nice, but we haven't finished counting all those votes in Maine yet. So, you know, when we count up our delegates, I'm in second place. You know, the absolute allocation of delegates. So the delegates is the name of the game. But I can expand on this whole thing about the polling. When I'm polled against the Democrats and the independents, I do better than the rest. So, and you know, the Republican Party claims they want somebody to win. And, of course, you understand why I have appeal to somebody outside the Republican Party, because the foreign policy is different. I have concern about civil liberties, and I'm a fiscal conservative. So I have a broad base of appeal. So that sort of goes by the way, and of course I have to fight to get that message out.
What was your sense tonight, from your perspective, of the most interesting or the most significant policy disagreement or confrontation or discussion?
Well, I think the most disagreement that's clear-cut is probably what you were able to point out. Three guys here, they say they want to go and fight Iran and go into war, and I have a different position, which is very legitimate, very important to me. And some people sometimes kid me a bit, and they say, you know, Ron, if you change your foreign policy, you might get more support. But you know, the young people that come to see me, that's their biggest issue, is the war and the spending, and I work this in, the war and spending it overseas and the crisis that we have, and I had a chance, you gave me a chance to mention that tonight. I think that is key, but it definitely is a different policy. But when I can further explain it, I can show where I'm closer to Eisenhower, because he was restrained, he got rid of the war in Korea, he didn't get involved with troops in Vietnam, he didn't get involved in the Formosa Strait, and I remember very well, 56, he would not go to war over the Suez Canal, so I really like it. And he was a military man, and I've been in the military, the others haven't, so I think in many ways I would follow some of the advice of Eisenhower as well as our founders.
Well, let me bring you back to the very first question of the debate, the gentleman's concern about the debt, which is something you've talked about for some time. As you know, there are even many of those who say debt and deficit reduction, two different things, should be a big goal at this moment. 8% unemployment, 8.7% in this state right now. Many say at this moment, though, take it easy and go more slowly, because if you pull too much money back, you might hurt the economy too much. You say cut $1 trillion in your first year. Do you worry that could have a negative economic impact?
No, because it's a myth to say that if the government doesn't spend the money, it won't get spent. We're just talking about who should spend the money. When government spends the money, they make malinvestment and they take care of their friends. When the people get their $1 trillion back and they spend, they're going to spend it by making economic decisions. After World War II, 10 million men and women came home, and we cut the budget by 60% and we cut taxes by 30%, and the Depression finally ended, proving my point that the government shouldn't be spending money, the people should be spending the money.
Congressman Paul, appreciate your time tonight. We'll see you on the campaign in the days ahead. And Anderson, you hear a very consistent message from Congressman Ron Paul. He does make the point. He is second in delegates right now. As we move on to a more crowded calendar, the big question before us is, can he win a state? And we'll know much better on that front in 10 days or so, Anderson.
And I believe consistent was the one word he used to describe himself. To answer your question, John, which you asked to all the candidates.
All right, very good. Good stuff there from Ron Paul, as always. All right, next up, here's one more article. This comes us from InfoWars, and it's a good question. Has Ron Paul formed a political alliance with Mitt Romney? Santorum claims two are in cahoot. Rand Paul would be honored to be vice president pick. This is from Paul Joseph Watson over at InfoWars. Goes on to say, the suggestion that Ron Paul and Mitt Romney are in cahoots because Paul is in the frame to be Romney's vice president pick has again surfaced following last night's presidential debate in Mesa, Arizona, after which Rick Santorum claimed the two were coordinating attacks against his candidacy. You have to ask Congressman Paul and Government Romney what they've got going together, Santorum told reporters. Their commercials look a lot alike, and so do their attacks. Santorum's campaign strategist, John Brabender, repeated the charge, stating, clearly, there's a tag team strategy between Ron Paul and Mitt Romney. For all I know, Mitt Romney might be considering Ron Paul as his running mate. Clearly, there is now an alliance between those two, and you saw that certainly in the debate. This is by no means the first time that the notion of Paul becoming Romney's VP has been mooted. As we reported earlier this month, the GOP strategist Jack Berkman put his reputation on the line during an appearance on the Fox Business when he boldly predicted that Ron Paul would be on the Republican ticket as a result of a brokered convention. The likely leader will be Romney, but he won't have enough delegates to win, Berkman told Judge Andrew Napolitano, forecasting that Romney would pick Paul as his VP because Gingrich and Santorum have extremely high negatives. Nobody in their right mind would want them on the ticket. I am now affirmatively predicting that Ron Paul will be on the ticket. I'll lay odds, explained Berkman. The idea of Paul being subordinate to Romney, an establishment type with flip-flopping political positions, has split Paul's supporters, with the majority of them seeming hostile to any kind of deal being done that could compromise Ron Paul's legacy as rock when it comes to standing by his principles. Others might suggest that Ron Paul's maneuvering himself into a position where he will be one step away from the office of president in a potential Romney administration merely represents a smart political ploy, a way of beating the establishment at their own game. After all, Rand Paul's successful senatorial campaign, after which he has proven his stripes as a champion of liberty, was achieved partly by pandering to establishment Republican rhetoric on a limited number of issues, such as the Iranian nuclear issue. When reporters asked Rand Paul, a Tea Party favorite, his what his response would be if Romney approached him with the offer of VPRE. He hardly poured cold water on the idea. I don't know if I can answer that question, but I can say it would be an honor to be considered, said Senator Paul. Anyway, there you go. Something to read. There's more to the article. You can check it out for yourself there. Now, We Are Change. You're familiar with them. They go around. Luke Rudkowski goes around. He's got his crew, and it's not just Luke. They're a big organization, but they go around and they ask questions, tough questions of these political candidates and supposed leaders, and they often catch them in positions where they're not really being so forthright. So this is We Are Change and Rick Santorum. Here we go.
Clear. It is explicit in our privacy. You can't go into anybody's house and look at what they have or their papers or any private things without a search warrant. This is why the Patriot Act is wrong, because you have a right of privacy by the Fourth Amendment.
Senator Santorum? Well, Congressman Paul's talking about privacy rights under the Fourth Amendment, which I don't necessarily agree with. The Patriot Act violates that.
They say we've looked at 28 million electronic records, 1,600,000 text messages.
I think the Fourth Amendment is very clear. It is explicit in our privacy. You can't go into anybody's house and look at what they have or their papers or any private things without a search warrant. This is why the Patriot Act is wrong, because you have a right of privacy by the Fourth Amendment.
Senator Santorum? Well, Congressman Paul's talking about privacy rights under the Fourth Amendment, which I don't necessarily agree with. The Patriot Act violates that.
They say we've looked at 28 million electronic records, 1,600,000 text messages, and we have 800,000 hours of audio. We have so much audio that they can't even listen to it all. You can tell whether I go to the doctor, what kind of doctor I go to, what kind of medication I'm on. You can tell what kind of magazines I read. You can tell what kind of books I order from Amazon. You have a right not to have the government reading your visa bill every month. We do have rights, and we should protect these.
Hey, Rick, you said the Patriot Act doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment. Can you tell us what the Fourth Amendment is? Please. Can you tell us what the Fourth Amendment is, Rick?
Thank you. Thank God for you.
They have a Fourth Amendment in Russia? Thank you very much.
Hey, Rick Santorum, can you tell us what the Fourth Amendment is?
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I already did it by way of absentee.
I guess not.
What happens when someone takes over who believes that your religion is to be combated, who believes that your political beliefs and your literature should be combated? What happens when that day comes? We cannot give up our liberty. If we do, if we give up our liberty and we trade it for security, we'll have neither.
All right, very good. So Rick Santorum, he talks a lot, but he doesn't always, stand behind us. Kind of a lot of politicians are like that, aren't they? They have things to say, and then when you call them on it or ask them what they're talking about, they don't know. All right, speaking of people that say things that are really stupid, here's John McCain. I thought we heard enough of this old fart when he got done up there on stage last year, but apparently the guy's still lingering around. McCain to introduce cybersecurity legislation giving even more domestic control to NSA and military. During the Senate's majority hearing on cybersecurity last week, Senator John McCain, a Republican from Arizona, announced that the Republican in the Senate would introduce a bill to complete with S. 2105, also known as the Cybersecurity Act of 2012. McCain seeks to give the NSA, the military previously unimaginable powers over civilian networks, even further expanding the ludicrous power over American citizens given to the military under the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012. This is similar to the conclusions drawn by a study conducted by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which unsurprisingly had a long list of corporate advisors who would directly benefit from such a centralization. Although even legislation is currently being considered, follows the study's recommendation by putting the power in the hands of the DHS. McCain would apparently rather see that power in the military's hands. The Cybersecurity Act of 2012 is currently being supported by the chairman of not only the Senate's Homeland Security Committee, but also by the chairs of the Commerce and Intelligence Committees as well. The current bill, co-sponsored by Senators Joseph Lieberman, a Connecticut independent, Jay Rockefeller, a West Virginia Democrat, and Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat from California. McCain spoke out against the debate on his legislation and instead called for widening the role of the National Security Agency in cybersecurity matters. All right, the article goes on for more. Basically, here's McCain again wants to impose more rules and regulations. Apparently, when he was a prisoner of war, apparently something went wrong upstairs, and it seems that all he wants to do is find ways to imprison Americans the way he was imprisoned. Maybe because he feels somewhat jaded or jilted because that happened, and maybe he wants to get retribution against all Americans for not coming to get him or something. I don't know. But whatever the case may be, this guy seems to be off his rocker, and these rules and regulations he's putting out there and wanting to have happen are a bit wacky. But what do you expect? Wacky guys make wacky rules, right? All right. Next one here. Top social media websites caught censoring controversial content. Facebook pays low-wage foreign workers to delete certain content based upon censorship list. For example, Facebook deletes accounts created by Palestinian resistance groups. Dig was caught censoring stories which were controversial or too critical of the government. See this and this. Now even social media site Read It, which helped launch the anti-SOPA internet blackout and publicize GoDaddy's slimy SOPA support, is doing the same thing. As just one example, posts from this website are being censored by Reddit. Specifically, a friend of this site who has submitted stories to Read It has received the following message of rejection from a Read It moderator named David Rice 666. It says, Washington's blog is not something we consider a good source for world news. From David 666, please submit the story from an alternative domain. And then we got another one here, another moderator named Maxion. I'm sorry for the submission. It's not appropriate for a subreddit. These are certainly also more open-minded moderators at Reddit, but a couple of censors can squash discussions on certain topics. Why are they censoring? Well, censorship is rampant in America, and social media has grown so big that it's become a target as well. In addition, as I pointed out last year, for ease of reading, we'll skip indentation. Wired reported on Friday the Pentagon is looking to build a tool to sniff out social media propaganda campaigns and spit some counter spin right back at it. On Thursday, Defense Department extreme technology arm DARPA unveiled its Social Media Strategic Communication SMISC program. It's an attempt to get better at both detecting and conducting propaganda campaigns on social media. SMISC has two goals. First, the program needs to help the military better understand what's going on in social media in real time, particularly in areas where troops are deployed. Second, DARPA wants SMISC to help the military play the social propaganda game itself. Okay. Folks, do you see the problems that's going on here? See, we have an escalating problem going on. It's not just in this country, it's in the world. As the world continues to evolve, it also continues to devolve. And it's devolving on a level of integrity. Because as lies become more rampant, those who said they weren't going to follow the lies eventually give in. It's only the strong and the brave that actually hold out the way that they say they would. But most are caught in the middle, and most are going to give in eventually, and that's what happens. So you have these big organizations, they come out and they make statements that they're going to stand up, and then they give in. Maybe money's thrown their way, or government regulations are put in their face, or something or another, but eventually they give in. Folks, your integrity is your integrity. Nobody can take that away from you, but you can give it away. The question is, are you so certain who you're giving it away to, and are you giving it away freely? And in giving away your integrity, are you jeopardizing the life of you and your friends and your family? I suggest that you are, and I suggest that you pay attention, because integrity is something very important. And you should learn what that is. Go look up the word. Go look up and see what integrity is. Spend a little time understanding why it is important that you stand by your ground, by your own integrity. And if everyone does that, imagine what would happen. But because so many individuals on this planet are willing to sell out, that's why we continually have problems. Stop selling out, and there won't be problems. Stop selling out, and we'll find better ways and solutions to fix the situations that are going on. Selling out only creates more problems. It doesn't solve the problem at all. It just creates more. Now, here is a vaccine program that is certainly deadly. Revealed, U.S. government program secretly injected citizens with plutonium, uranium. This is from Anthony Gucciardi at the Intel Hub. In a secret program that is now admitted to be true, the United States government injected unknowing human participants with highly toxic plutonium. It sounds like a bizarre torture scenario that you'd expect to see blamed on illegal terror organizations, but the individuals behind the crime are actually doctors working for the United States government. How sad. Disregarding the health of innocent citizens, the government testers were eager to see how unknowing participants suffered as a result of secret plutonium injection. It began in 1945 when an employee at the Oak Ridge nuclear facility was in a car accident. Eb Cade survived, but was taken as a human participant in a disturbing study he did not consent to. It is important to note that this man was a 53-year-old African American, as previous government trials have singled out African Americans and other minorities. The racist sterilization program occurred between 1929 and 1974 under an admitted eugenics program that officials claimed were creating a better society. Most victims were poor, black women who were deemed unfit to be parents. Individuals as young as 10 were sterilized simply for not getting along with schoolmates or being promiscuous, as many parents were misled into sterilizing their children. Eb Cade was taken and bound to bed with a broken arm and leg, where doctors interviewed him regarding his current state of health. After determining he was in a state of proper health, doctors secretly injected him with 4.7 micrograms of plutonium on April 10th. It is still unknown who exactly ordered the program within the U.S. government, as they have mangled to disassociate themselves with the entire nefarious program. At the time of the injection, scientists were perfectly aware of the negative effects associated with radiation. With cancers and radiation sickness on the rise, these scientists knew exactly what they were doing, examining the effects of plutonium isotopes on living beings. Prior to the test on Cade, the scientists injected animals with plutonium and noted the severe adverse effects. In some cases, animals were even fed radioactive waste. In fact, one scientist received a full face of gas and required his stomach to be pumped along with full face scrub in an attempt to eliminate the threat. The scientists made sure that they were given full treatment after the exposure. Meanwhile, they were injecting individuals with plutonium. Wow. Where did the article? I'm going to leave that up to you. How sad that we are in this. You know, it kind of sounds like in the movie V. You know, the whole backstory of the prison and the secrets that were going on there and the tests that were going on. Didn't seem like it really got specific, but this kind of sounds something dark and sinister that might be going on in a place like that. Again, don't give your kids vaccines. Don't give anyone vaccines. Look, they were experimenting with plutonium. What else do you think they might do? If they're that evil and sinister to put radioactive material in somebody, you can't put anything past them. That's just pure evil. All right, this next story here has to do with the trial and WikiLeaks. A little play on words, though. A leak. Here we go.
Soldier thought to be behind the largest leak of state secrets in U.S. history is set to go on trial. Bradley Manning has spent almost 2 years in prison waiting for the official process against him to begin. Among the documents claimed to have been released by him was video footage showing U.S. forces firing on unarmed Iraqi civilians. Critics say the trial is part of a system that hides alleged crimes and punishes those who speak out. RT's Christine Frizzau reports.
1, 2, 3! Bradley Manning must be free!
Nearly 2 years in waiting, much of it in solitary confinement, and Private First Class Bradley Manning's trial is finally set to begin.
Free Bradley Manning! Free Bradley Manning!
Among the 22 charges filed against him, aiding the enemy, violating the Espionage Act, and illegally transferring classified data to an unauthorized source, WikiLeaks.
Come on, fire!
Part of that was this video showing U.S. Army pilots killing unarmed civilians, including 2 Reuters employees, a video that had been classified by the U.S. military, though the Government Accountability Project's Jesselyn Radack said it never should have been.
You cannot go around classifying criminal activity. That is not proper classification. And I haven't heard a single person claim that what the collateral murder video showed was not war crimes.
A sentiment Manning seems to agree with. In an online chat conversation, he said he hoped his putting the information out there would prompt worldwide discussion, that he wants people to see the truth. A short time later, Bradley Manning was arrested, in the process becoming one of the clearest symbols to date of a new set of standards, a system that now works against those who report wrongdoing and protects those doing the wrong, quite often in the name of national security.
The pendulum right now is still very much a post-9/11 time of national hysteria and limited civil rights and liberties.
And she would know. Radack was the Justice Department whistleblower in the case of the so-called American Taliban, John Walker Lindh.
I had advised not to interrogate him without an attorney and not to torture him. And when I blew the whistle, I ended up being put under criminal investigation, referred to the state bars in which I'm licensed as a lawyer, and put on the no-fly list.
But it wasn't always this way. In 2002, the Time magazine Person of the Year was the whistleblowers. And although the government tried to have him put away for life, Daniel Ellsberg was hailed as a hero by the public for leaking information that became known as the Pentagon Papers, classified documents he helped author that revealed what was actually happening in Vietnam.
Ellsberg, what he revealed to the public is what the public should have known from the government itself. Important knowledge.
Important knowledge now often stifled, both on and off the battlefield.
In the military, if a woman is sexually assaulted or abused or even raped, she's supposed to go through the chain of command, which will actually harm her instead of helping her.
Outside of the military, policies are also being drawn up to protect corporations. The so-called Whistleblower Improvement Act, if passed, would actually harm whistleblowers, requiring them to report misconduct to their employer first before going to any regulatory agencies. It would also remove any incentives to do so.
Our government and the businesses are so intricately linked, it's hard to tell them apart.
Both now working harder than ever to keep their secrets out of the public eye. In Washington, Christine Frizzau, RT.
All right, so another example of the government just wanting to make sure that the truth does not get out there by putting laws and restrictions against those who would dare speak out the truth. How dare those individuals tell the truth? Huh? Can you believe that in America there's actually individuals that want to tell the truth? You mean we don't actually live in a country where it's all about lies? That kind of goes opposite to what the political agenda seems to be, because it seems to be all about lies. All right, this story here is the last story before we get into our meditation. This one comes to us from NASA Space News. It's very interesting because we've heard stories of different fireballs and objects coming through the sky in the last month or so. Here it says here, in the middle of the night on February 13th, something disturbed the animal population of rural Portal, Georgia. Cows started mooing anxiously and local dogs howled at the sky. The cause of the commotion was a rock from space. At 1:43 a.m. Eastern, I witnessed an amazing fireball, reports Portal resident Henry Strickland. It was very large and it lit up half the sky as it fragmented. The event sent dogs barking and upset cattle, which began to make excited sounds. I regret I didn't have a camera. It lasted nearly 6 seconds. Strickland witnessed one of the unusual fireballs of February. This month, some big space rocks have been hitting Earth's atmosphere, says Bill Cook of NASA's Meteoroid Environmental Office. There has been 5 or 6 notable fireballs that might have dropped meteorites around the United States. It's not the number of fireballs that has researchers puzzled. So far, fireball count in the in February 2012 are about normal. Instead, it's the appearance and trajectory of the fireballs that seems to set them apart. These fireballs are particularly slow and penetrating, explains meteor expert Peter Brown, a physics professor at the University of Western Ontario. They hit the top of the atmosphere moving slower than 15 kilometers per second, decelerate rate, and make it to within 50 kilometers of Earth's surface. The action began on the evening of February 1st when a fireball over central Texas wowed thousands of onlookers in Dallas-Fort Worth area. It was brighter and long-lasting than anything I've seen before, reports eyewitness Darren Moran. The fireball took about 8 seconds to cross the sky. I could see the fireball start to slow down, then it exploded like a firecracker artillery shell into several pieces, flickered a few more times, and slowly burned out. Another observer in Coppell, Texas, reported a loud double boom as the object broke into two major chunks with many smaller pieces. The fireball was bright enough to be seen on NASA's camera located in New Mexico, more than 500 miles away. It was about as bright as the full moon, says Cook, based on the NASA imagery and other observations. Cook estimates that the object was 1 to 2 meters in diameter. So far in February, NASA's all-sky fireball network has photographed about a half a dozen bright meteors that belong to this oddball category. They range in size from basketball to buses, and they all share the same slow entry speed and deep atmospheric penetration. Cook has analyzed their objects and come to a surprising conclusion. They all hail from the asteroid belt, but not from a single location in the asteroid belt, he says. There is no common source for these fireballs, which is puzzling. This isn't the first time sky watchers have noticed odd fireballs in February. In fact, the fireballs of February are a bit of a legend to meteor circles. Brown explains back in 1960 and 70s, amateur astronomers noticed an increase in the number of bright-sounding, deep-penetrating fireballs during the month of February. The numbers seem significant, especially when you consider that there are few people outside at night in winter. Follow-up studies in the late 80s suggested no big increase in the rate of February fireballs. Nevertheless, we've always wondered if something was going on. Instead, a 1990 study by astronomer Ian Holliday suggests that February fireballs are real. He analyzed photographic records of about 1,000 fireballs from the 70s and 80s and found evidence for a fireball stream intersecting Earth's orbit in February. He also found signs of fireball streams in late summer and fall. The results are controversial, however. Even Holliday recognized some big statistical uncertainties in his results. NASA's growing all-sky fireball network could end up solving the mystery. Cook and colleagues are adding cameras all the time, spreading the network's coverage across to North America for a dense, uninterrupted sampling of the night sky. The beauty of our smart multi-camera system, notes Cook, is that it measures orbits almost instantly. We know right away when a fireball flurry is underway, and we can tell where the meteorites came from. That kind of instant data is almost unprecedented in meteor science and promises new insights into the origin of February's fireballs. Meanwhile, the month isn't over yet. If the cows and the dogs start raising a ruckus tonight, advises Cook, go out and take a look. So that's right, listen for the cows and listen for the dogs. And that way you will know. Anyway, very interesting because we still have the story, as you heard early in the UFO news. The Planet X situation has not gone away, Nibiru, so there's still talk about that, and then the fireballs. You know, just because we haven't had any major stories about any of these things recently, like Elenin or Nibiru, doesn't mean that these things have just ended. You know, we still are in the year 2012. There still is a lot of prophecy that is out there, and a lot of information that has not played itself out completely according to the timelines presented. So we're still in for a very interesting show. We just need to pay attention. This is a galactic graduation. Nothing to worry about or get excited. Just a time to grow and evolve. If you're into that kind of thing. If you're not into the growing and the evolving kind of part, then just keep watching the mainstream news and you'll satisfy the part of not growing and not evolving really quickly. Alright, last thing for today, our meditation. So I'd like you to go ahead and close your eyes and relax. Close your eyes and relax. Alright, let's imagine that today we are floating We are floating an inch off the ground. And as we are floating and we feel that we want to float higher, we take a moment to consider what is keeping us anchored. And we realize that our doubts and our fears are anchoring us. So let's imagine that we're getting rid of our doubts and our fears. Just imagine letting them go, and just like the ballast on a balloon, as you drop these doubts and fears, you float higher. And as you drop a few more of your doubts and fears, you float even higher yet. Till finally, you get to the point where you're just floating freely. Unanchored. And as you float freely without any anchors holding you down, you realize not only are you floating, but you have the ability to fly. And so you fly. And as you fly, feeling this sense of freedom from all of the doubts and the fears, you realize how easy it actually is to move past the doubts and the fears. You realize that all that's required is the effort to want to move past the doubts and the fears. And by simply putting forth that effort, the doubts and the fears are able to be eliminated. It's no more difficult than that. But sometimes that first step is the hardest part. And as we are flying around, and as you are looking at the earth, you see others flying around as well, having released the doubts and the fears around them. And as you look down at the earth, you can see that there are still those that are anchored to the earth. And without the doubts and the fears clouding your vision, you're able to see clearly the doubts and the fears that anchor them. And though we cannot go and actually unanchor another, we can send positive vibes and energy down to everyone, encouraging them to release the doubts and the fears on their own. So let's just imagine sending out positive vibes to everyone around the planet to be able to let go of their doubts, to let go of their fears, so they can truly fly free. Let's imagine all of our chakras are activated. Red at the bottom of the spine, orange above that at the belly button, yellow just below the rib cage, green at the heart, blue at the throat, violet at the third eye, and indigo at the crown chakra, turning into bright white as it continues on into the cosmos. Honor your connection to all that is, was, and ever shall be. Send out love all around the planet, just with the thought of sending love. And with that, let's bring our energy and attention back to the present moment on the count of 3. 3, coming back to the present moment filled with confidence. 2, coming back to the present moment filled with faith. And 1, coming back to the present moment happy, healthy, and whole. Happy, healthy, and whole. And there you have it. Once again, we have come to the end of the show. Prayer, meditation, the whole kit and caboodle. Hey, thanks for being here. It's a pleasure as always. I'll be back tomorrow with more news information. So go out and have a good day today. Be safe and keep your eyes open. You never know what you might experience. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.